So yeah, did you enjoy the video, Matt?
Well, I thoroughly enjoyed it, mate, and I just think that it's helpful for people to know that we take it seriously. Go and rate it, and the more people that rate it, I think it'll work. Hopefully.
Cool. Kirsty, did you enjoy the video?
Yeah, I'm not sure they're gonna.
Well, watch it and find out.
See you soon.
Bye.
Ludus, Vulpes.
Welcome to Ludus Vulpes. My name's Kirsty,
I'm Phil.
My name's Matt from Board Game Picks.
and today you join us as we run through a board game gossip about Board Game Geek ratings.
That's it.
What do I mean about Board Game Geek ratings, guys?
Go on, Matt. You go first.
Those precious moments after a game where you're like, is this a 6 or a 7? Is it an 8 or a 9? I have one game ranked at a 10. That's out of 700 games, there's only one.
Agricola for those who are
But yeah, it's taken the time to evaluate a game, put that rating into the system to help other users, potentially people that you know follow you, or to collate your collection. It's like your library, really, isn't it, of games. And
I just want to say one thing, and I have to be slightly impartial in this video because I have never, ever rated a game
I never knew that.
on Board Game Geek.
Never knew that.
For those that didn't realise that, I have lots of games. I play lots of games. I will give you my opinion on a game, but I don't necessarily agree with the user ratings. So we will talk about that in a bit. So I might be a little bit quieter on this video in comparison to other videos.
I think it's worth saying that we've never on Ludus Vulpes, we've never given a game a score. Board Game Picks, you do give a score, and the reason we've never given a score is because it's not a review for us. It has not been. It's never about a score. It's about opinions. It's our opinion of the game. If you know the games we like, then hopefully you share some of our opinions. Therefore, if we say a game is probably good, and we will often caveat that.
Yeah.
So we recently reviewed Woodcraft and caveated that with, if you don't like rondels, don't get this game.
Yes.
Because it's rondel-tastic. But if you know us, you know our opinions, you know the games we like, if we then say, we think this is a good game, and you share our opinions, that should be enough. Whereas if we said this game is a 10 out of 10,
What does that mean?
Yeah. Matt, what does that mean?
Well, do you rate stuff, first of all, Phil? Do you have stuff as a rating on Board Game Geek?
You know I've got a couple.
Okay.
I started doing it when I first started getting into board games.
I think what I like about your channel specifically is that you'll get to the end of it and it's so thorough and detailed. I know so much about the game, and you will hint at whether it's a recommendation or it's not a recommendation.
Yeah.
So I feel like it's quite an honest review of the whole game process, which I quite like. But in terms of this, we're here today because we've been thoroughly entertained by the Gloomhaven Brass Birmingham.
And now Pandemic Legacy getting on the act as well.
It's kind of move over Audi and M&S. Colin. Move in Gloomhaven.
There's a lot of review bombing going on, and I was hoping Arcanova might sneak up another space with all the ones that I've been hitting. So we're just trying to work out how important the rating system is. There is an official description of the rankings which says that the average rating is the average of ratings for a game. The geek rating is a value that is computed using all ratings as an input, and an algorithm partially described here which mitigates some of the bias effects. So there's some mathematical algorithms going on in the background.
And the algorithm's interesting. I don't know if you read any of the details on the algorithm. So the algorithm adds some average scores into every game so that it trends down. Yeah. Trends towards a norm figure, which mitigates high and low scores, like consistently high and low scores. So if everyone's rating a 1, if ones are being chucked in there a lot and 10s are being chucked in there a lot, the average score put in as a dummy score balances out those sort of extremes. Yeah. But those extremes have value, or should. Those extremes should have value. Don't always have value. Yeah. So it's an interesting one. So you've got the average geek rating, which is a true reflection of the average of everyone's opinion. Yeah, but the Board Game Geek rating is a bit more hidden. There's no official declaration on how that works. A bit more science to it. Yes. And an attempt to mitigate some real challenges with user ratings,
Yeah.
and aggregated ratings over time.
I think it shows they take it seriously then, don't they? There's
Yeah.
not, it's something that because some games, I think you have to have 30 ratings on a game to be able to
Even get rating, be able to show it on.
yeah,
Board
to
Game
show it as a ranking, yeah.
So I just at this point say, and I'll just give a little bit of a monologue and then ask for opinions from these two. The value of the ratings on Board Game Geek means that games get ranked. So you have a number 1 game and you have a number 22,782 game, or whatever the lowest.
Yes, there really are that many games.
Do you know what? If that was the actual last game on the Geek, I'd be amazed. I'd be like, how do I do that? That's pure fluke. But it means there's a top game and there's a bottom game, and there's a game at every step in between. Now, what that often means is, if someone's looking at what game to buy next, it's a useful metric sometimes for people to look at and go, oh, this is in the top 100, so it's probably a good game.
Yeah.
And that's an influencing factor, I think. So that's one of the big influencing factors of that ranking system, that actually it can lead and drive more sales of a game.
Yes.
And that, I'm not sure how valuable that actually is as a metric. I don't know what you two think. Is it valid? How important is that top 100 slot for a game in progressing sales, creating more of an audience, creating more of a fan base?
I'll let Matt go first.
I think for newer gamers, if you look at the top 100, you can go, oh, Pandemic Legacy Season 1, I'm a new gamer. That's something I should be getting straight away. And it's probably not the most accurate reflection of, for people who are less familiar with the hobby, there's a risk that they may go, oh, this is the best game ever, Gloomhaven, and then go and spend £120 or whatever it is getting it, and it may not be for them. So I think it can drive sales possibly in the wrong way, potentially. I use it personally just as my own metric, and it's interesting to see. And I do go back and rescore things over time as well. So I personally enjoy that aspect of curating my my library. But the Board Game Geek, they do their own. They have a listing for them. I didn't realise that.
They do.
Yes,
Each of the 1 to 10s have a
Yes, they do.
So my
Do you think
10,
we should-
go on.
Do you think we should tell the audience what it officially is?
Well, I was going to say my 110 is outstanding, always want to play and expect this will never change. So it's like what a 10 is to me is different to what they've set it up to be, is the point I was trying to, it's different for everybody potentially.
Because your 10, which is a grid colour, would you always want to play it?
There you go.
You tell me that collection over there, and you'd want to play a Agricola instead?
Every time.
Every time?
If it hits the table. I didn't play it yesterday. I played Brass Birmingham. Then I rated it a 10. No.
So, Kirsty, what about your thoughts on the top 100 as a...
So, interestingly, there are... I'm not going to name and shame. However, at Essen, and for 2 years in a row now, I have walked past a stand whereby they say, come along, test the game, play the game, and this was before when it was a Kickstarter, and then last year when we went, when it was being sold, and leave us a review, 3 stars and up, and you win a chance, you are put into a chance of winning this game. Now, obviously, if you think you're going to be entered into a competition, you're going to go for 5 stars because you want to be one of those people that are picked, because it feels like you're more likely to get picked if you put a 5-star in. That is incorrectly influencing the ratings.
It absolutely
And then, I don't know where that game is. I haven't looked it up intentionally. But I feel that when organisations do competitions such as that, it's basically making a farce of things such as the ratings.
So if that got into the top 100, you'd feel like probably not as deserving as other games.
No,
because it was
I feel like
incentivised.
everybody was just trying to get a free copy of the game. And actually, if anything, it shows that they're not willing to support the making process, the design process, the art process, the testing process, the actual creation of the game, and all that every single penny that goes into a game, when we as game lovers purchase them, know that we are supporting.
Yeah.
If you're trying to just get a free game, I
think it's definitely a short-term game potentially over a long term.
Yeah.
But it does surprise me. When I joined the hobby, I used to think if someone spends £100 on a Kickstarter, they're more likely to rate it positively. But I actually find gamers who can be deep thinkers actually appropriately rate games until recently. So it's been
Yes.
fascinating to see how people have reacted to Brass Birmingham naturally through a natural progression, taking the #1 spot.
Yeah.
And then Gloomhaven fans. I think there was 62 1 ratings of Brass the next day. Yeah, so Gloomhaven returned to #1
Briefly.
Briefly, yeah.
And it's an interesting one, and I think it's nice that it's happened in a way because it highlights some of the flaws of that ranking system. So for those of you who don't know, as Matt's alluded to, Brass Birmingham, which is a game 10 years old.
It's an old one, yeah.
So that has progressively gone up the charts over time and eventually landed at the #1 slot, knocking Gloomhaven off, which has been on for 4 or 5 years now, since its release. And at the minute Gloomhaven was knocked off the top spot, suddenly people were rating Brass low and Gloomhaven high. 10s for Gloomhaven, 1s for Brass. It's happened the other way around as well. It's proper gone tit for tat. Everyone's playing the game. But that manipulation has been obvious and apparent. And that, I think, it leads to question marks about the validity of a rating scale anyway, when it can be so easily influenced. And also the kind of factors that go into people rating games, because Matt's already alluded to what 10 means. Matt, do you want to go sort of 10, 7, 4, like that? So it's don't really more, but like skip through a few.
Yeah, a #8 would be a very good game. I like to play. Probably I'll suggest it will never turn down a game. So for me, I would rate 8 as an above average game, and it probably will stay in my collection. So so what their meaning is, again, probably slightly different to what it would be for me. A 5 would be an average game, slightly boring, take it or leave it. But
which is like your halfway point, which is quite an interesting.
That's probably 5 and 6 must be the majority of board games. Surely you would think.
But what they're saying is, take it or leave it. I'm not really that bothered by it.
Yeah.
To be their midpoint of a rating of a game.
Yeah. Well, it's their system. We have to.
We abide by it.
Absolutely.
We abide by those rules.
#1 is interesting, where it says defies description of a game. You won't catch me dead playing this. Clearly broken is the phrase if you rate a game a 1. So lots of people must have thought Brass was broken in many ways.
Yeah.
Interesting. Not defining as a game.
Yeah.
Strike. So it's an interesting rating scale because it's clearly a very subjective rating scale.
Yes.
In fact,
so is it emotional rating? Would you say?
I think if you use Board Game Geek's descriptive writing on each of those scales, it becomes a very, very emotive rating system, which almost explains why when Brass went to the top, the immediate emotion from Gloomhaven fans was to vote it down, and then for Brass Birmingham fans to vote Brass up and Gloomhaven down. And you could argue that that's balanced out now, and we'll see what happens next. But it's such an emotive topic, and we're in a privileged position that we review games.
Yes.
So we try and move some of our emotive output away from that. But my #1 game of last year was my #1 game because it caused me to have most fun.
Yeah.
And that is absolutely an emotive reason for putting a game at my #1 slot. So, as difficult as that rating scale is, is there a better one out there? Is there a better way of doing it?
It's a brilliant question, and I've got my answer personally would be, I think it's democratic the way it's done now. It's a community vote, and you vote in and out whatever you are most passionate about. So I like the fact that they're not. How would you feel if they started getting involved in the ratings and they started what would the community think about that?
How many people would they have to employ?
Yes.
Yeah, so I like it because it's democratic and it's not broken, but I think there are ways in which you could add fixes. And in my mind, my thoughts would be if you rate something now and then it clears after 12 months. So you have to either go back and re-rate it again.
I like that.
And that's like an ongoing average. So that'd be probably one thing I would consider doing.
Yeah.
Maybe something like if you've got your collection on the Geek, every so often you get a reminder, right, do you want to rate these 10 games? So, and break it into like portions of 10, because if you've got a larger collection, say for example, was it 700 you said at the start of this video, Matt?
Yeah.
That's quite a daunting task to go through and, rate every single one of those. Whereas if it was an automated system where it's like, oh, do you want to rate these 10 this week? You know, and it was broken down into something like that, it would keep things fresh.
Yeah, I think there's nothing wrong with that. But do you keep it fresh and you haven't played it for 6 months and then rate it, or do you wait till you play it and then re-rate it? What if some games never get played again? And it's like it's a signpost for other people. If enough people vote something an 8, I'm more likely to take an interest and try a game than if something's voted a 6. I think it leads into other aspects of what BGG do, and one of the factors that I use a lot would be the weighting system. So I've probably done it about 12, 13 times where I've gone in and given it a weight, and I think it's light, medium, medium heavy, and heavy.
Yeah.
There are those 18xx players that put games as light.
And Kirsty will put games as light.
A Great Western Trail's a light game for Kirsty.
It is.
But it's and actually we're back onto subjectivity, you know, like the weighting of a game.
Yeah.
So we've got over there, people. You can't see it. I'm not turning the camera around. We've got Atuar, which on the box it says advanced level game from Uwe Rosenberg.
Well,
That's
talk
interesting,
about this
isn't it?
Today.
No, but I have some very clear expectations of what I expect as an advanced level game from Uwe Rosenberg. Atuar is not it.
No.
And for me, that's like a 2.5 to 3. It's
so weightings can be misleading potentially in terms of.
But that's weight, and we're talking about ratings of games today. So
You're back on track from Kirsty.
But you're still rating the weight. That's the point.
Yeah.
You still got to go in and put that rating.
there's when we've done lists in the past, and our most anticipated games of Essen, for example, weight has played a key focus in some of my choices, because I have quite a few light games, or I don't need any more light games in my collection at the moment of that particular theme, so I may skip that. And if that is incorrect, or people have said that it's a really heavy game and actually it's not a heavy game, for me that's going to feel quite a disappointing aspect, because obviously subjective, as we've said, but actually it does play a point, doesn't it?
Yeah,
in what you choose.
It's part of a community feature, and I think there are other ratings as well. So I think, again, it's interesting because you can rate it. Is it best at 2 players, or 4 players, or 6 players? So
I think that's a really good idea.
Yeah, it's nice that so these are all features I go to BGG for. But obviously with rankings as it is now, if you could look at the top 10, I think there's a lot of slow burns in there. So I think there's more of this to come. I think probably Gloomhaven draws a line. Will be up there first or second.
Frosthaven will be the big question. Will that?
So they'll be like the top 3 or 4 then probably. The Gloomhaven most likely.
Should there be a domination in the market?
I was just about to ask a similar question.
Okay, you answer your question.
But my question is very similar. It's like, so in the existence of Board Game Geek, we've had 8 games that have sat at the number 1 slot. That's not a lot.
No, it's not.
And some of them have sat there for 5 years plus. Now, early on in sort of modern board gaming, yes, you have Puerto Rico that might sit there for a while because there's not a great deal of competition. Yeah. Fine. But actually that competition, to say there's not much competition is really challenging now. And you've got some... So we've recently played Ostia, which I think is one of the most exceptional games released last year. It's interesting, it's fascinating, got loads of good stuff going on there.
It's my number 1
and actually we all rated it in our top 10 for last year. That game will probably not get into the top 100.
It'll be 2,000 or something. It'll never,
because there's not that many copies of it. So there's not many people to rank it. There's not that many people to rate it. And so a game that has, I think, adds a layer of value to the hobby in general, will not get the recognition it deserves because it was a Kickstarter. It's a very well managed Kickstarter. It was a very well developed Kickstarter. But unless there's a second print run of that, and word gets out, because those 2 things really matter, that game will languish in the mid-2000s.
All the top 10 games are in retail, effectively, as well, which is interesting. I also found it a bit of a juxtaposition to see that Gloomhaven is like a massive dungeon crawler, probably one of the best in class at that, and then Brass Birmingham is best in class Euro games. So they're literally the two main types of games, 1 and 2 going up against each other.
Do you think that's subjective, Matt? Do you think that's subjective?
Well,
there are other dungeon crawlers.
I do. Well, we'll see what else happens, but they are two of the top level games going up against each other. But so what happens next? What else is going to go to number 1?
The thing is, though, do you then go, okay, so that is an overall ranking of all games. Do you do it by type of game?
You can
But
filter it.
should there be a separate, what ranking do you want to see? Is it all games? Is it this? Is it that? Or rather than always be in the top 100?
I think that's a brilliant point, actually. And it's, if you're a Eurogamer, which I don't define myself either way, but if you enjoy your heavy Euros, your entire collection is Vital Lacerda and... I don't know. Like, you've got Food Chain Magnet in there as well, and a few.
Stefan Feld.
Yeah. You don't like fun.
Rosenbergs.
Sorry, that's really harsh. Those that like Stefan Feld. His games are mechanically interesting. But
terrible behaviour there.
We've got Notre Dame in our collection, and a few others. I like my Feld games, but and Bonfire actually. Bonfire's fantastic.
Yeah. Anyway,
but. Your opinion of Gloomhaven is going to be very different to someone who is a Eurogamer at heart but loves the dungeon crawl, because that's who that game's aimed at. Like, it's aimed at people who enjoy the dungeon crawl genre but want a Eurogame feature to it, which is where you're losing variability. It's much more managed, and so it becomes that managed experience. So those two gamers are very different, and they're looking for very different things. Someone who's brand new to the hobby, who should be picking up Ticket to Ride, Acropolis,
entry-level games.
Carcassonne, still Carcassonne. Like, those games are like a fantastic introduction to the hobby. Azul, and then you go into Splendors, and you keep you build and build. But if that person goes into the top 100 and buys Through the Ages, they're leaving the hobby. That's just true.
Yeah.
Yeah,
but a lot of people would argue Through the Ages is probably a masterpiece and deserves to be in the top 10. I think it is in the top 10 at the minute. I'm not sure where, but
but it's definitely in the top 100.
Yeah,
and fair enough. It's a lot of these games might class as masterpiece games, but they're not. They are not for everyone, and that's the most important thing. But because Board Game Geek is the loudest community out there for rating and ranking games, it's often, when I first got into the hobby, it was like a first port of call.
Yeah.
And I then started to read up about Agricola, because it was the first modern board game I bought after pandemic. And I didn't buy that game for a long time because the idea of playing a game about subsistence medieval farming didn't really appeal. But actually, once you've played it, it's fantastic. Fine. But that was the next game to buy, because it was, and I'm fortunate that I played games when I was young that had complex rules and difficult rule structures, so Agricola didn't put me off. But if all you've played is Ticket to Ride, and the next game you pick up... Fair enough. And actually, the next game you pick up is Agricola.
Yeah.
There's a big difference.
It's a big ask.
Yeah.
And you will get that from that rating system.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's not fit for purpose, you think?
What's the purpose? I think that's a bigger question. What's the purpose?
And B, if you could do it by type or...
You can filter economic, top 10 economic. There is a way to do it. They don't make it easy to find anything on Board Game Geek.
Which you have to advanced search.
Part of the issue,
why do you think that is?
Just because it's archaic, and when it was made, they've never updated anything. But
so, do you think there is a need for an update?
Definitely, 100%.
Yeah, and that needs you to fund, and that needs all of us to fund Board Game Geek a little bit more, because without funding, that the site itself and all the other things that the site do won't improve and won't progress. And actually, there is absolutely a need. But I think the question of purpose is really important. What is the purpose of those rankings? We've already said we don't rate games on the channel.
No.
Here's a meta thought. Is it not by definition the people that go to Board Game Geek are already in the hobby, therefore it's skewed anyway, potentially? Because you wouldn't...
Absolutely.
Yes and no. When I first joined the hobby, I remember joining on to... And it was before I started actually tracking my plays. And it was, I've heard about this game. And it's like, what kind of game is it? I'm not sure. Let me just quickly look it up. And it was actually a go-to place where you can find you know, just the very basic information about a game, you know, what kind of style it is. Like when I started joining in the board gaming group, it was like you know, or like post-COVID, and we started to list the games that we're going to be playing, and if it was a game I didn't know, I had the opportunity to look it up and kind of get a grasp for what the art style's like and what the mechanics are in it and what I can expect.
That's the perfect use of Board Game Geek. You're looking at the images, looking at the mechanisms, you'd look at the weight as you're on the page looking at it.
This is why I say it's so important, even if you've just got a prototype game. If you get it on the Geek, get it on the Geek and just put a couple of images and just a brief description. Because it doesn't matter how early on it is in that game's progress, it's so important to do that.
To be found.
Yeah.
That's how powerful it is. Yeah. They do wield a lot of power unknowingly, I think, over games. And it's interesting to see some games have got Agricola First Edition and Second Edition are both in the top 100. So should those be coming off? Should that be something that changed?
So.
When if it's a second print run, should they not be combined? Is there an ability to combine it, or is it a different game?
The challenge is how users rank it, and that's the thing. You know, we've had challenges with registering plays, with expansions and stuff like that. So I think it becomes really difficult because the idea of crowdsourcing a ranking is a really nice idea, because if you get 50,000 ratings, it's probably going to be relatively accurate. Like that's probably just, it normalizes itself at that kind of, you know, at the large numbers. At the small numbers, it becomes much more problematic. And then especially when you talk about a top 10, when you've got a very small fraction between games, small changes can swing things quite a lot. And the top 10, the gaps aren't big.
No, it just reminded me of an interesting scenario there, just from exactly what you've said. There was a board game on Kickstarter I was interested in backing, and I thought I was just going to have a look at the comments and the ratings. And there was only 10 accounts that had rated it a 10 with great game, play tested at such and such. And I was just like, I'm not too sure about this. They look like they've been correct. They didn't rate any of the game. They were involved in the hobby. They hadn't done anything else. It was just created for, and I was like, that's a bit of a red flag for me. So I didn't end up backing it. I think it funded, but so it's a resource that you can go.
Post video, I will be asking you.
I'll tell you afterwards.
So I think the purpose of the ranking system is basically to hold on to a score. That's all the ranking system's doing. It's not trying to sell you games. It's not trying to influence your decision making particularly. It's just trying to hold on to scores. And when you're interested in numbers, when you collect enough of them, you start going, well, what can I do with these numbers? And that's exactly what's happened in Board Game Geek. What can we do with these numbers? People are ranking games. Well, we should aggregate them. Just aggregating them straight is not necessarily the best idea, so we'll add a little bit of an algorithm so that we can give new games a chance, give games a smaller population of people ranking it more of a chance to do well. And they've done what everyone who collects a lot of numbers does. They've done things with the numbers that make sense to them, but its purpose is to hold those numbers. And for me, that, I think, is its only purpose. But I think in the hobby, the purpose, people feel the purpose very differently.
Yes. Yeah.
So is it something you would consider doing going forward? Do you think you would like to start rating things potentially?
No. No? I'm going to be honest, no. I will put a comment about...
But why is that? Why wouldn't you feel like, if you're passionate and you love woodcraft, or, you know, you've had a bad experience with something, you can...
For me, my numerical ratings differ with those of the user ratings there. I find that... Like, I could absolutely adore a game and love it, but I'm not going to say I'm going to play it every single day and it's going to be the only game I'm going to play for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
And I don't think there's enough balance. You can't just go, do you know what? Like, Imperial Steam was one of my favourite games of 2021. I didn't think it got anywhere near enough coverage. I really enjoy that game. If anybody asks me, it's in my top 5. But am I going to give it a rating? No, because I have a whole collection of games. Yeah. And I love the variety of the different games.
It was refreshing that you're not beholden to them. Yeah. I felt like I was that passionate about Agricola. I wanted to give it. I wanted to give it a standout rating. So yeah, it's interesting that everyone's got their own criteria.
It feels like the 1 to 10 that they're providing does not fit the mindset of my. I don't even want to do it 1 to 10. The mindset of what mine would be.
So why are we doing top 10 videos?
That's rating from one. That's not. that's not using the ranking like this. Like, I'm not saying that number 1 defies definition of a game.
And I'm
or
just putting you on the spot.
Yeah.
So yeah.
No, that's fine. But that is, of the games I've played,
Yeah.
if I had to choose 10 that I really enjoyed this year, and
that's helpful.
and why,
These are good information pieces for people to consider.
I don't think
purchasing
people at
games.
home, if I said I've rated this a 10, meaning I'm going to play this game and nothing else the rest of the year, I don't think people would appreciate me saying that. Because I don't think people would go, well, this is going to be really boring if all we're going to see each week is the same game over and over again.
Here's another episode from Pure Steam.
But yeah, so for me, it's more than just the numbers, because I really like you mentioned earlier, you mentioned Great Western Trail. I really like Great Western Trail. Last time I played Great Western Trail, if I reflected on that game that I had with 44 points at the end and getting smashed by every single other player, I'd go, wow, it's a 3, I'm not going to touch it.
So you could emotionally rate it low,
I
couldn't you?
won't play this game again, although I might be convinced, because the way I felt after that game.
But is that not an accurate reflection of what they're doing?
So I think that's
yes
interesting.
and no.
Because actually,
Each play is unique.
that's fair. And I think also you've got this really strange situation that occurs whereby I can log on to Board Game Geek, create a new account, and register it and rate a game. I don't even have to register to play for that game.
Yeah, and you should have to rate. I think you should have to register a play.
To rate a game, but that would reduce
Yes.
the number of ratings that are out there.
Well, why not?
Well, they should link accounts to email accounts so they have a defined amount. I'm sure you can create 10 Board Game Geek accounts if you wanted to, but I don't think they're connected to anything.
But actually, I think that like we've been quite clear a lot of the time when we play a game 3 to 4 times, you can have a genuine opinion of a game. Like we played Woodcraft the first time I played Woodcraft, whatever. It's just another game. You're pushing some pieces around. Second time I played it, wow, mind blown. This is fantastic.
It was like that with Cooper Island. We did Cooper Island, and the first game, it was like, what? Did the scoring mechanism, and it was like, oh my god, I play so differently, and it's so important to have that experience.
But I feel like a lot of times, and not the games that get into the top 10, by the way, not even the games that get into the top 100, but a lot of times games will get rated based on a single play. Like we know from like groups we play with that a lot of games will hit the table once, people will play them, people will rate them, done.
I do it myself as a placeholder. It's like, what did I think of it in the past? I think sometimes it also helps with your collection, what's good enough to keep or cull. So it's a tool to go back. Anything that isn't rated very highly, we can maybe put on the tray pile.
But you're using it for yourself. And
I'm not using it for
that rating is a public rating as well.
Yeah,
which is interesting.
Yeah.
Because actually, I think that's a really nice way of using it to go, actually. Bottom 10% are going this year.
Yeah.
That's one way of doing it.
Yeah.
I do think though that you've got a really key point there, both of you, in the fact that to do a rating, it must be connected to a single email address, and you can only have one rating. That would stop people heavily influencing and just making, logging in with anything and saying 10, 10, 10, 10 to push a game up. And then the other thing is, if you've played that game, or at least had an experience with that game that needs to be registered somewhat, I think that's a fantastic idea. There's what do we use? It's the BG stats that we use to track the games, and I think that's a one-off payment of £2, something like that, £2.75.
You can get it for free. The £2.75 adds the challenges, which we enjoy as well.
So I've paid that quite happily, in the knowledge that I've spent £2.75, which is probably less than a cup of tea nowadays in those places. And this is in pounds, by the way. But for me, I've supported Board Game Geek when they've created this app. So I've done my bit to support them. I'm enjoying using the app. But also it means that if anybody wants to see how I play the games, if anybody wants to, see what games I own, it's been invaluable for people buying gifts for me. Oh, they've already got that one, so I'm not going to do that. Or, oh, she really likes that style of game, so maybe she'd like this.
It's really interesting because you're so into your numbers and tracking, but you won't rate a game.
Yeah,
it's fascinating.
I think rating a game is risky business because rating a game, part of that is there's a huge amount of biases that go into rating a game, and one of the things I will say about the Brass Gloomhaven thing, I think the Brass achievement is so much greater than the Gloomhaven achievement because Brass is a £40 game and Gloomhaven's a £140 game, or it was when it first launched, and actually, if I spent £140 on a game, I'm going to want that game so badly to be good. And if I spent 40 quid on a game, yeah, I might like it to be good, but I'm more happy to put it on the shelf and leave it for 6 months and not pick it up again.
Yeah.
Because it's only 40 quid. It's only 40 quid.
40 quid.
Yeah.
Come on.
But like compared to the rest of like even a small collection, £40 for a game is you're going to get your value. You know, you can get your value out of it. So there's definitely a bias when you spend more. And I do think Brass's achievement is greater because it's a more cost-effective, more a less valuable game in a way. And I think that kind of idea of how could you improve the rating process to make it have a more meaningful purpose, and you could combine things like number of registered plays, actually make someone who's played a game 5 times, their opinion is slightly more valuable than someone who's played the game once.
I wonder if they do that behind the scenes, because there are ways. They do a little video each month about what was the most played game. It's always Wingspan. It's always Terraforming Mars. They're like the top 2. Dune Imperium's crept into the top 5. Yeah, so they do put it out on their YouTube channel what the most tracked plays were. There's a way to do it.
And the other thing is, I think there's been a couple of blogs from Eric Martin, and like there's definitely an element of responsibility when curating this, but also very much an element of pushing that responsibility back onto users and saying to users of the system, don't be beholden to this list.
No.
Be sensible with this list. And I think that's, as a hobbyist, that's a really important challenge for us all. That list isn't just about, it's not about going out and getting the top 100 games. I don't think I'd play all of them in a reasonable amount of time. It's about finding the games that work for you. And if that game is ranked 5,000 on the list, it could be easily be your favourite game.
Yeah.
Easily be your favourite game. And that's not wrong. That's some other most important thing to learn. That's not wrong.
There's no wrong or right.
A game at 2,000 could be classed as a hidden gem.
Yeah,
you just got to know where to know it.
You got to find it.
Yeah.
And I think it's such a hobby in its infancy still, board games.
Yeah.
And because of that, there's still a lot of learning to be done. Like if you want to buy a digital camera, you can find hundreds of reviews for any one model.
Yeah.
And you'll find like some very objective reviews that talk about just the technology, how the technology is implemented, how it works. You'll find some emotive reviews. And all of that becomes a huge repository of knowledge. Okay, there are 9,000 board game channels plus on YouTube. But if you do digital photography on YouTube and find out how many channels are dedicated to that, there's nothing there. We are nothing. We are tiny percentage of the people creating content on YouTube. Board games are a tiny fraction of that.
Drop in the ocean.
Literally a drop in the ocean. And that tells you how still in its infancy we are as a hobby. We're not mainstream. It's not hit mainstream yet. It's heading towards mainstream. And that's wonderful. And tools like Board Game Geek and the Geek Rating, Geek Rating, all of that, there is a critical responsibility for for that kind of ranking system to understand its power and do it better. I think that's my challenge. I'm laying it down today. That's my challenge to everyone. We need to do it better, because people are coming to the hobby going, oh, I'm going to pick myself up Through the Ages or Twilight Imperium 4th edition or whatever it might be, or Gloomhaven. It's a big sprawling monster. And we've been vocally saying we don't particularly think the game's amazing. It's done some innovative things and it's interesting, but it's not like, wow, blow me away. So it's an opinion.
Yeah.
And that ranking system could do with just being better, to be work better, and to understand the purpose people will use it for, and move the ranking system closer to the purpose people will use it for.
I think the only way to do that, my final piece on that would be, is that if more people ultimately use it and rank games, you're going to get as close as you possibly can to a sensible outcome with the 1s and the 10s and everything in between. But it's hard to signpost that as well. People have got to know that Board Game Geek exists to do it.
Yeah. So there are other ranking systems available.
Yeah, Board Game Atlas does a ranking system.
Wow.
They've tried to set themselves up as a kind of a Metacritic for board games. The problem is that website's even harder to navigate than Board Game Geek. So, because I've been prattling around with it since we set the title.
That's a misstep.
Conversation. So you can have a look at it, and they've got maybe 20 curated reviewers that they are happy to take a rating from, which that, you know.
Oh, that's interesting. So they've got like a council of reviewers.
Yeah.
And what's the impact of giving 20 people the power to rate games?
Exactly.
That's quite a far-fetched.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But-
especially when those people receive money.
Yeah, well, it's
to review
it's
those
far-reaching into the
games.
industry if they rate a game highly. But then if they're experts in their field, does that not
Yeah.
offset they can be objective enough about entry-level games versus heavyweight
And
games?
some of them are reviewers, I think, are very good at doing that and,
Yes.
and providing balance and understanding the game they're reviewing. I think that's the other thing that's important. If you're like, oh, I'm a heavy Europe like gamer, and today I'm playing Ticket to Ride Europe, and I thought it was rubbish. It's like, well, you've actually failed to understand who the game's targeted at and whether or not how good the game actually is.
Yeah.
Because there is a like either review the games you love or be respectful of the games you review. Like, either way, it's fine. I don't mind how you do it, but don't mix the two.
No.
It doesn't work. I think it's Board Game Geek does it best at the moment.
Right now, yeah.
But that doesn't mean that someone else
it's
can't
not
do it better.
broken.
Yeah, and it is a little bit broken.
So, just in response to your question about me with numbers, why I don't do it. So, anybody that knows me knows that I love a good old-fashioned letter. Anybody who receives a text message from me knows that I fulfill every possible character. It's like, hi, how are you? I hope you're well. Blah, 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 blah. And it's long, it's wordy, and I love writing. So if I was ever going to, talking as well, if I was ever going to give anything a rating, I would passionately talk about it or write about it instead of just going
It's a 10.
7. Because what does that mean? And to me, that is why I think I do this sort of thing and the videos instead of just going number.
Yeah, but you could really help some people. You could, instead of doing these, hundreds of games, so you could do that potentially. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, at some point, if I'm, I don't know, stuck and not able to do anything, or maybe that's how I'll spend my time. But yeah, not saying it's not worth the time, but I enjoy expressing why I like a game, why I don't. And the ins and outs and my experiences of each play of the game, rather than just.
And that's why you have a
giving it
YouTube
a
channel
yeah.
to be able
Yeah.
to explain that.
And
That's
share
very
that.
cool.
Yeah.
So, there are our thoughts on the Board Game Geek ranking system. We touched on weighting, but it was light. Do you like that?
Oh no.
Anyone else got anything they want to say to finish the video?
No witty comments, unfortunately. Stop review bombing.
Yeah, please. And actually, 10s and 1s don't help anyone most of the time. So if you rate a game a 10, be sure it's a 10 for you. If you rate a game a 1, be sure it's a 1 for you. Have played the game a number of times as well, please.
Yes, and half a play or quarter a play doesn't count. Or if you're going to go for, if it's a prototype and you've had an experienced round, put that in the comments.
Yes, please.
It's so important to put that in the comments. Not in the comments in this video. I'm sure you'll fill those below with your agreement or disagreement with what we've said in this video.
So, thank you for watching today. We hope you've enjoyed the video, and if you have, please like and subscribe.
We are also on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter,
And YouTube. And TikTok.
And every other available fandangled thing out there.
Search for Ludus Vulpes or Board Game Picks, and you'll find our happy faces or voices all over the world.
Thanks for your time today, everyone.
Thank you.
See you soon.